Hi and welcome back. First of all, our title on this video is a little bit deceiving because the fried liver attack is technically only when the knight captures at f7 to drag that king out, like we saw in our progressive level video. But we're going to classify all these in the same category because you're trying to play the fried liver attack and we'll see what could possibly happen. So I'm going to look at a few variations and then we're actually going to see a game that Grandmaster Alexei Shirov won in the Olympiad in 2014 using the legitimate fried liver attack. So first of all, this is what we're going to come across. The Traxler, the Fritz Variation, Ulvestad Variation, and even Queen F3 line. So let's go ahead and have a look and see these on the board and look at the Shirov game after that. First of all, to our chessboard and our usual e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, Italian game. And now we have the two knights defense, and now we can play our fried liver attack. So at this point, we are going to introduce a new option that black has. And besides what we've been looking at, which is d5, we're going to say, how about the Traxler or the Wilkes-Barre variation? This is a counterattack. Don't take the f-pawn with your knight, because then they sack their bishop at f2, and it gets really complicated. So let's just play bishop takes f7 check. And the king should go here to e7 to reserve that f8 square for his rook. And now bishop to c4. And just keep an eye out for this. Your opponent's going to play at some point rook f8 and have ideas about sacrificing on f2 if you're not castled already. And they're also going to have ideas of the queen to e8 and queen to g3. And they're also going to have ideas of queen to e8 and queen to g6. So you have to play a little defense. Your opponent's playing a gambit, and in return for that gambited pawn, they're getting a lot of piece activity. So this is if your opponent does not block off your bishop with d5, but instead plays this variation called the Traxler or Wilkes-Barre. Now let's go ahead and look at what if they do play d5. So now we have more variations, because after the pawn captures, your opponent could play our main line, what we're calling the two knights main line. And then if you wanted to mix it up, and I don't recommend this unless maybe you're playing in a blitz game or you've really studied the line, but you could play queen f3. Now I recommend bishop d3. It's nice and solid, and it guards that e4 square for your knight so it can retreat from an attack by the h-pawn. But queen f3, let's see what happens here. Your opponent very likely is just going to take your bishop and let you grab that rook in the corner. But as is often the case when your queen goes on an adventure like this, she may not get out alive. And so if play continues something like this, for example, now suddenly your queen's trapped. And even though you have a material advantage, barely, it's black that has more active pieces, and you're going to be in a little bit of trouble after you give up your queen for the rook right now. So rewind, 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 and let's come back to this position and now look at the Ulvestad variation. Ulvestad is when black plays b5. Obviously bishop takes, their queen captures at d5. They're attacking your bishop and your pawn on g2. So let's just retreat right away. Now black has three main options. They could play queen takes, and then you're just going to bring the knight out. They could play knight captures d5, then bishop takes b5. Let's look at the variation where you actually need to know a move. A lot of times opening traps are going to have a variation where if you don't know this one move, then you're going to be in serious trouble. So let's look at this one. So knight to d4, we attack the knight, and now each knight gets captured. You take their knight at d4, they take your knight at g5, bishop takes check, king comes over, and now they're maintaining that threat on your g-pawn. Your queen guards it, they put the pressure on the long diagonal, and when you castle now, this is when you have to know the move, because they're going to guard their bishop and then play knight to e3. Yowza. Discovered attack on your queen, and behind a queen is a threat of mate. So you can't play queen takes knight because black plays queen takes g2 mate. So you have to counter with your own threat of mate. So now they don't have time to take your rook because you have mate at d7. So black's best move at this point is just to trade queens and simplify from there. All right, so that's Ulvestad Variation, and that one complicated line within the Ulvestad. And now finally, knight to d4, the Fritz. So the Fritz variation could get really tricky. Once again, if you are white, don't fall for this tempting move, d6. If you play d6 right now, opening up your bishop to support f7 again, you could lose very quickly. We are going to do another video on defenses against the fried liver, but basically like this. Capture, uh-oh, we take the rook, and now you're in huge trouble. Check, and that's checkmate. Yowza. Okay, so don't do that. Instead, when you capture and they play the Fritz variation, knight d4, just chase it with your pawn. And when the knight moves back to f5, then you can just play chess. And you will see sometimes that when you play c3, some of your opponents might play b5, but you have a cool move. You can play, just like you did in the Ulvestad, you can play bishop back to f1. You're still attacking their knight. They move the knight. Then you get to grab that pawn on b5. All right, so those are some variations, but now let's look at that Shirov game. I promised that we'd have a look at it, so let's check it out. Shirov is white. This is 2014 Chess Olympiad, and he's an amazing grandmaster. He lives in Spain now. So here we have it, legit fried liver attack, right? Check, king comes out. Here's the pressure on d5. And as I have mentioned, Shirov is just going to give away this fork. Do not try to memorize these moves. This is really for your entertainment only. So knight captures here. This is Grandmaster Shirov playing. And now he gets rid of that pawn, or fights to get rid of it, and just keeps on attacking like crazy. Unbelievable, all the different things happening in this position. And it doesn't last very long. The poor guy loses his queen, and material's just falling off the board like crazy. And eventually, after some fun moves, we see that, yowza, there's just too much trouble going on. Those pieces in the corner, look at it. The black rook on h8, the black knight on a1, the bishop hasn't moved yet. And that's what happens when you don't activate your pieces, and your opponent is Alexei Shirov. All right, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and check out all those lines. A lot of fun stuff. I'll check you later.